I'd like to welcome Nicole Kenny for her presentation. She's the Senior Director of Professional Technical Services for Virox Technologies Incorporated in Oakville, Ontario. She's going to speak to us on Is a Wipe a Wipe? Implications of various wipe substrate materials on proper disinfection of surfaces using commonly used disinfectant chemistries. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and being able to present this study on behalf of the research R&D team at Virox Technologies. So I do need to disclose that all researchers on this project do work with or worked at Virox at time of generating the data. For those of you that know me, I like to tell stories, and I generally get to have longer than 10 minutes to talk. So we're going to have to put on our seatbelts because I'm probably going to have to talk a little bit fast. But the reason for our study was actually as a result of a story of working with a hospital that was with an outbreak where we found that there was something really interesting going on between the disinfectants and the microfiber that they were using. So we took kind of what we'd learned with them and kept asking questions, and it became into the study. So what we looked at was evaluating the interaction between wipe substrates and commonly used disinfectant chemistries, the impact, and then the impact on how the interaction on saturation load, so how wet the cloth would get, and how that impacted the drying time when we're wiping the surface. So we used three different wipe substrates. We used a melt-blown polypropylene, and this is your traditional pre-moistened wipe that we would often use for clinical surfaces. And we also are using them as a dry wipe system within environmental services, the larger disposable wipes. We used a looped microfiber cloth as well as a cotton terry cloth. And then we used commercially available disinfectants. So we used a hydrogen peroxide-based product, a quat alcohol combination product, a phenol that could be diluted, a concentrated quat, and a 0.2% sodium hypochlorite. You might wonder why we're choosing the 0.2% sodium hypochlorite. The reasoning for that is when we used just the traditional straight bleach that we would dilute, it wasn't actually absorbing into the melt-blown polypropylene, and it beaded on the microfibers, so it just wasn't something that we could use as part of the study. So the product that we use is a commercially available bleach-based product that has a surfactant in it, which is important for an absorption perspective. Each wipe was tested for the minimum maximum load. So the minimum load being the minimum amount of solution that it takes to wet the wipe so that there wasn't any dry spots. The maximum being the amount that once you've got to that point, then it's going to start pooling or falling out. It's not going to absorb or stay within the cloth. We tested all the wipes at both the upper and the lower saturation levels, wiping them on a surface, looking at the impact on dry time, as well as measuring the amount of liquid that was released. So we would weigh the wipe before we wiped it and after, and that would determine the amount of liquid that was released. And from a drying time perspective, we used 50% of the surface when it appeared dry. The reasoning for that is as a surface, depending on the type of product, the surface dries differently. And so as the surface gets drier and drier, it's a little more difficult to be objective, where 50% was something that we could consistently give a result when we're doing the visual inspection. This particular slide summarizes what happened with respect to the lower and upper level of saturation for all three cloths. It's interesting to me anyways, that when we're looking here, the pattern from the lower level to the upper level is really consistent between the different chemistries, both for the microfiber and terry cloth as well as the non-woven. Between the microfiber and the terry cloth, the lower saturation level and the higher saturation level was about 40%. And for the non-wovens, you'll see only product A and product B are shown because the other three products didn't absorb into the non-woven wipe even after sitting for 24 hours. It did not absorb into there. The percent load in terms of looking at the 600 to 700%, you might be questioning how we determined that is actually taking the weight of the wipe and then the weight of the solution that it took. So if we had a wipe that was 10 grams and it was able to absorb 6.5 times its weight in solution, that then becomes 650%. What I'd like to do, rather than show some additional graphs, is actually give some video demonstrations of what we're seeing. So this is an example of looking at product A versus product B with a non-woven. Same size wipe, same volume of solution wiping the surface. And this is really showing where there's a difference in terms of dry time. So the importance from a disinfection perspective is if we're not getting contact time, we're not going to achieve kill. And it does take a little bit, and we didn't look at it from a label perspective, but you'll see product B is evaporating significantly faster than product A. So when we're looking at it from a disinfection perspective, that means we're going to have to wipe the surface multiple times in order to achieve disinfection. It took about 23 seconds. The next one is really interesting. This is something we want to do some further research into, but looking at the type of wipe substrate and the and how it, there we go, how it works when we're driving. So we were comparing product B here, the non-woven versus the microfiber. The small size of the microfiber is so that we could compare the same volume of solution between the two wipes. And what we're seeing here is the microfiber, and we want to do some further investigation because it dries in a very striated pattern, which is really interesting. It's not a consistent dry the way the non-wovens are. From an absorption perspective, when we'll come back and actually wring out the cloth to show that there is quite a significant difference between the solution, the microfiber still really holds on to the solution. So the solution, the disinfectant is not getting put onto the surface. We do have this video on a website if somebody wants to look at it. So in conclusion, what we did find is changing the substrate can make a significant difference in the absorption level. And as I showed on the first slide, it's about 43% between the substrates. Drying time was positively correlated to the liquid load and the liquid release, and it differs significantly between the different types of substrates, so it's something that we really have to investigate. Lastly, the different wipe substrate will release different amounts of liquid when left on a countertop. So that's a pooling effect. So if you took a cloth and you just put it on a counter, it will actually, if it's not holding or the absorption, it will actually release really quickly and you'll get solution that pools. So when we're wiping a large surface, what that means is as you get to the end of the size of the surface, if I started here and worked across, you're not going to have enough disinfectant to achieve your contact time. Disinfectants with poor detergency properties cannot properly wet hydrophobic substances. So this was shown with the non-wovens where the 3 disinfectants didn't absorb. It's a surfactant that's really important to get that absorption. Combined properties of the wipe substrates and the disinfectant chemistries play a major role in the mode of liquid release during the surface disinfection. So again, when we're looking at that, we have to take into consideration how the disinfectant is being released from the wipe. And so a change in wipe substrate has a very significant impact on the saturation level, more so than the chemistry. So again, when we're choosing a process from a cleaning perspective, we need to take the wipe into consideration. And so to ensure that adequate cleaning and disinfection will occur, we can't simply change the wipe substrate without first testing its saturation level, as well as the drying time of the disinfectant that's being used. So I would challenge in terms of where we often focus on what does a disinfectant kill when we're looking at our products to use within our hygiene programs. I think what we need to do now is actually look at the disinfectant. We need to see how that disinfectant is going to work with the wipe substrate that we are going to be using, and then ensure that we have a well-developed protocol in order to ensure that we're having the best environmental hygiene program that we can have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Any questions for Nicole?
Get up there, Salah. I know you have a question. And I knew Michelle would have a question too.
Mm-hmm. Regardless of what chemistry you're using, how quickly it dries is so effective. Did you do any studies looking at organism killing using different claws with the same compounds you tested, like to correlate the fact that when the dry time is so short, you actually don't get any killing?
Great question. We haven't yet. That is the intention. So the first part was because some poor stool has to wipe the surface enough and kind of doing to make certain that we had kind of some statistical data that we could show. So that is our intention as a second phase of the study, is actually look at some microbiological testing. Now, we had done a previous study on contact time, not looking at a wipe perspective, but just from a drying. And so there is literature to support that if you're looking at a label claim, and a label claim says 10 minutes for a quad as an example, and a quad traditionally will stay wet maybe about 2.5 minutes on a surface, it's achieving less than a 3-log kill if we're looking at, say, Staphylococcus. So it's not achieving a true disinfection level. Salah?
Nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, Rotella in 2000 published something about that dry time and contact time in Asia. And it really, I think this question is fundamental, because if we don't answer this question about the microbiological activity of the disinfectant, we're keeping that big question mark out there. And I think I encourage you to do something like that. Because Rotella actually argues the whole concept of dwell time as insignificant because it's based on a test tube method and not an actual disinfection of surfaces. In, at least in the US standard, the 10 to the 6 is almost non-existent in real life, and most of the CFUs in real life are kind of maybe 1 to 2, 3, 1. So, but great, and I hope you hinted to a promise that you're going to do some microbiology.
Yes, for certain. Thank you, Salah. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.